तर्केण मतिरापनेया प्रोक्तान्येनैव सुज्ञानाय प्रेष्ठा यां त्वमापः सत्यधृतिर्मतासि त्वादृङ्नो भूयान्नचिकेतः पृष्टा जानाम्यहं शेवधिरित्यनित्यं न ह्यध्रुवैः प्राप्यते हि ध्रुवं तत् ततो मया नाचिकेतश्चितोऽग्निरनित्यैर्द्रव्यैः प्राप्तवानस्मि नित्यम् कामस्याप्तिं जगतः प्रतिष्ठां क्रतोरानन्त्यमभयस्य पारम् स्तोमं महदुर्गायं प्रतिष्ठां दृष्ट्वा धृत्या धीरो नचिकेतोऽत्यस्राक्षी तं दुर्दर्शं गूढमनुप्रविष्टं गुहाहितं गह्वरेष्ठं पुराणम् अध्यात्मयोगाधिगमेन देवं मत्वा धीरो हर्षशोकौ जहाति एतत् श्रुत्वा सम्परिगृह्य मर्त्यः प्रब्रूह्य धर्ममणुमेतमाप्य स मोदते मोदनीयं हि लब्ध्वा विवृतं सद्मनचिकेतसं मन्ये अन्यत्र धर्मादन्यत्राधर्मादन्यत्रास्मात्कृतात् अन्यत्र भूताच्च भव्याच्च यत्तत्पश्यसि तद्वद सर्वे वेदा यत्पदमामनन्ति तपांसि सर्वाणि च यद्वदन्ति यदिच्छन्तो ब्रह्मचर्यं चरन्ति तत्ते पदं सङ्ग्रहेण ब्रवीमि ओमित्येतत् एतद्ध्येवाक्षरं ब्रह्म एतद्ध्येवाक्षरं परम् एतद्ध्येवाक्षरं ज्ञात्वा यो यदिच्छति तस्य तत् एतदालम्बनं श्रेष्ठमेतदालम्बनं परम् एतदालम्बनं ज्ञात्वा ब्रह्मलोके महीयते।
हरि ओम। The 12th mantra, the Lord stated, Dhiraha, the wise man, renounces the joys and sorrows. Harsha Shokaha. Harsha is the joy, Shokaha is the sorrow. By the means of meditation. Adhyatma Yoga Adhigamena, by means of meditation on the inner self. What it means is you're renouncing the external because you're asserting the internal. Renounces the joys and sorrow. The joy and sorrow refers to the external world. You renounce, a wise man renounces everything that is external. Fame, no fame, reputation, disreputation, following, no following, pride, no pride. Everything that revolves around the self-created world of ego, a wise man renounces. He realizes the ancient something which is never born. Atman never is born, nor will it die. It is immortal, incomprehensible. It is that which presides the very intelligence. It is that which enlivens the very intellect to comprehend. Since it is that which enlivens the intellect which comprehends, it is incomprehensible. As in the Kathopanishad, it is said, it is that eye of the eye. The first eye is the capital I, the second eye is a small I. Atman is that which enables the eyes to see. Just like we say, even the most powerful telescope cannot be used to viewing the very eye of the observer. If I am using the telescope, if I am the observer, the telescope cannot be used to see the eye of the observer. I can't see myself. So it only means it negates the limited capacity of the sense organs, the mind and intellect. Your sense organs are limited. It cannot perceive God. Incomprehensible. You cannot capture God through feelings, nor can it be comprehended or limited by your thoughts and definitions. So when he says it's incomprehensible, it is not an objective pursuit. All our experiences are objective. Even the knowledge I'm giving you is objective. I am throwing ideas at you. Your intellect is trying to grasp and understand what is being said. So spiritual experience is not a transaction like this. Even though we need environments like this, a cultured, a tutored environment to invoke this knowledge, Brahman cannot be captured in such tutored dialogues. The moment you say, I'm able to capture Brahman in a dialogue like this, it becomes objective. It is not experienced by going to a particular place. It is not a location based. So you can't say, here Brahman is very powerful. What are you talking? God is more powerful there? I don't understand that statement. God is everywhere. You don't have the eyes to see. You only see and feel in a particular place. Therefore, for you, it is more pronounced there. How can it be more pronounced at a particular place and less pronounced at another place? I don't understand that. It's just a certain conditioning that we are thinking in those lines. But Brahman cannot be conditioned by time, space, location, personality. Oh, that place is very divinized. It is not a question of divinized. The question is, you are able to relate to that environment. Brahman is there in the worst of sinners or the greatest of saints. But I am not able to see in a sinful person is because I don't have the eyes to see. But the Brahman has got nothing to do with the sin of a sinner or the virtue of a saint. That's what he says. It is seated in the cavity of the heart. And in the last qualification of the mantra, he says, it is seated, it is amidst misery. So you've got to follow the line of thought of the mantra. Can we have the translation once again, please? The wise man renounces the joy and sorrow. It has to be read in one continuous, then you know what the qualification is. The wise man renounces the joy and sorrow by means of meditation on the inner self. The moment he does that, that is the cause, that is the abhyasa, then what is the result? He realizes the ancient. All these are adjectives qualifying what that Brahman is. He realizes that it is ancient. He realizes it's incomprehensible. He realizes it is seated in the cavity of the heart and amidst misery. What is amidst misery? That Brahman is amidst misery. Guhvareshtam. The word Guhvareshtam, it is dwelling in the abyss. It is in miserable situations. Brahman is amidst miserable situations, but Brahman is not miserable. They are two different things. Oh, I'm going through terrible situations, but I am not subjected to that experience. I'm going through tough times, but I'm not subjected to that experience. I have transcended that experience. So when he says amidst misery, a very unique, a very uh, not so common construction. So when he says amidst misery, what is the life of a samsari? The opposite of a samsari is, first of all, you know what a samsari is? Lakshmi Ma, I need to bring it to your attention, and I need to bring it to your serious consideration. I feel very uncomfortable talking to people who cannot switch on their cameras. Now, if you feel you are not presentable, please don't attend. If you are not presentable in a meeting, that means you're not ready to be there. So I recommend you not to be here. If you're here to be a part of the discussion, you must be completely present. There could be reasons on a given day you're not able to be seen, but I don't think I can communicate with you. I don't think I can connect with you. I don't think I appreciate you being here incognito. So please be mindful that you be prepared from the next satsang to be there, seen, so there is that perfect interaction. All right. A wholesome interaction. And I really appreciate that. If you can be mindful of that. Okay. So the question I asked is, what is the opposite of a sannyasi? Sorry, sannyasiya, samsariya. A samsari. Opposite of a samsari is, I said, a sannyasi. Who is a samsari? A samsari is one who gets himself entangled in anything. It is said, one who gets lost in the mundane terrestrial world. But it's not getting lost in a terrestrial world. Rather, a samsari is one who gets entangled in anything he does. If you get entangled even in your spiritual activity, it is called a samsar. A samsari is one who is entangled in samsar. Anything that you create and you get entangled by that creation, it's called a samsar. So a simple analogy. A spider spins a web to create its home. But imagine, can you ever, a spider spins its web. Sometimes when you go into especially I've seen it if you go into the tropical forests, I have that wonderful experience. Some of you may have experienced, when we've gone to Malaysia to go into the woods, when we have taken a forest walk, you find huge spider webs spanning a good few meters. And they spin their web so vast. And why do they spin the web, that large? Is to catch the prey. Those flying insects and bugs that get caught up in that web, it becomes vulnerable and they become prey. And moment there is that vibration of the disturbance of an insect getting trapped, the spider comes and it kills and it destroys it. It is food, it's prey for it. But no spider ever gets caught up in its own web. A spider spins the web to get other insects get trapped in it, but it doesn't get trapped in its own creation. You've never heard that, have you? I've never heard that. So you are the architect, like a spider, creating a web for your own world. You're created for your own purposes with an objective to fulfill your objective. The spider spins the web to reside and create an opportunity to attract prey. So it has its purpose. So you have created a samsara, means a world for your own purposes. But what is the point if you get yourself stuck in your own creation? Has no meaning. So samsari is one who has got entangled in your own creation. So if your work becomes a burden for you, if your own world becomes a burden for you, that is a sign of your own entanglement. Whether it be so-called material engagement or a spiritual transaction, if you are entangled in it, you are a samsari. So therefore, it is important to understand what is your state of your mind and intellect in your transaction with the world. So the word amidst misery refers to samsaris who are steeped in the world that they have created, which creates a sense of delusion. A samsari is one who gets caught up in his own creation, which creates a sense of delusion. Now, what is delusion? My English language is not that good. Maybe Ashwati can help me understand what the word delusion means, Ashwati. I see a halo around you. That's the reason I'm asking.
It's the light behind me, I think.
Yeah, that's whatever it could be. It could be natural or it could be infused, but I see some halo around. Meanwhile, Srinivasji, please hold on to something. You might fly away. I don't know. Somewhere you are maybe in the 40th floor or 100th floor somewhere, Nowadays you are in greater heights. So please watch out. Yes, Ashwati.
So what is a delusion? A delusion is a fake scenario that is created by your mind that causes anxiety, and possibly just, unnecessary emotions.
A delusion is what is that word you used?
Fake scenarios created by the mind.
It's not really a fake scenario. It's very much real for you. What do you mean fake scenario? It is a situation created, self-created, where it becomes the seed of a lot of emotions, a lot of anxiety, a lot of restlessness. So delusion is to believe something which is not real, you give it a status of reality. Is it not?
Right.
In a state of delusion, you give something a status of absolute reality. It means everything to you. So it's almost getting trapped into a situation where it is everything for you, which is not the case. In reality, your problem is not my problem. It doesn't exist for me, but you believe everything is real for you. So when you are in that state of moha means delusion, you get clouded. So delusion clouds your intellectual clarity, which is the root cause of varieties of emotions. You become a slave to your desire, right? You become slave to your passions. You become a slave to jealousy and greed and hatred. All the maddening emotions and thoughts come and cloud your intellect and wisdom. That is a state of delusion.
So, Guruji, I have a question. Can delusion ever be seen as a positive thing?
Now, the choice of words in the emotions that arise from delusion, we said as desire, passion, jealousy, greed, hatred. Is there any positive connotation in all this choice of words or the emotions?
No, it sounds negative.
It sounds negative. Unless you are qualifying it to mean something else that I don't know. Here, it's not a choice of words. Sometimes language becomes a barrier in conveying a certain feeling or an emotion. But what is being conveyed is that, in fact, you described an emotion of anxiety. There's nothing positive about anxiety. So from delusion comes all these. So there's nothing positive about delusion. Deluded, in fact, has a negative connotation. The English word itself is negative. So I don't know why you want to see anything positive in it.
I was just thinking more of, the diamond is created through pressure. So if your mind tricks yourself to, create like a scenario that would want you, like push you to do more work or anything like that. So that's kind of my thought process, but I can see how it is negative anyways. So.
Yeah, I wouldn't look at it that way because it has a different implication, right?
Okay.
So amidst all this delusion, amidst all this misery, the self remains unaffected. So a wise man realizes the nature of Atman. So what we gather here is the Atman, which is amidst all this misery that is created because of your delusory relationship with the world, Atman remains unaffected. So the moment you are affected by any situation, it is because of you are going away from the inner self, you are identifying with something external. So when anybody gets agitated or disturbed by something, my only advice to that person, my only advice at that point, even to advise myself, is I am going away from the inner self, which should be your anchor. When you're anchored to your own self, the waves don't rock the boat. The anchor, when it drops into the ocean, gets to the seabed. When you're anchored, nothing will rock you, nothing will disturb you. So a wise man anchors himself to the self. So to the extent you're anchored onto the self, to that extent you will not be affected by misery. You may be subjected through misery, but you're not affected by misery. The greatest of gain is no gain. The greatest of pain is no pain. The greatest of gain is no gain. It does not dislodge you. In the Gita, second chapter, he equates it to an ocean. An ocean which he says filled from all sides doesn't affect the ocean. He compares a sthita prajna to be like an ocean. Nothing unsettles him. So this was the last section I wanted to clarify in this mantra. Before I move on, yes, Vijayji. Yes, sir, please.
Hare Krishna. I had a thought about your last comment that Brahman cannot be pronounced, cannot be more pronounced in some places and not other places. So a few thoughts and questions with regards to that. One is the concept of pran pratishtha. Secondly is, a lot of these these holy places have deities that have been well documented as source of miracles. Um, how do you explain that? And third is, can't the light be more pronounced in some areas and not in some areas? And fourth is isn't the presence of Brahman more pronounced in the presence of an enlightened master versus an ordinary being?
Too many questions to deal with.
It's all linked. Like,
I get that. I get that. Now, when you talk of prana patrishta, or you're talking about what was the second point you said? The third
miracles and
point,
deities.
miracles and deities. What's the other one?
Third is just general, can't the light be more pronounced in some areas, not in some areas? Like I'm thinking, like if the sun is shining, but if you have a cloud in some areas and no cloud in some areas, in the physical form, we can see that there's light is more pronounced in some and not in some areas. Even though it's not pitch dark in some areas, there is light, but there's more bright light in one area and less in some areas.
So, with reference to the sun, there is no darkness, and sunlight is all pervading.
No, I'm talking about shadow.
I get you. Shadow doesn't make the sun any less. I put an obstacle and I have blackout curtains and I make my room dark. The sun is very much there. I have put an obstacle.
Correct.
It's not that sun is not there. You remove the obstacle, you will be bathed in that light. So the question of sunlight being less or more doesn't arise, because sunlight is all pervading. Divinity is everywhere, but we have created places of worship because to make it for our own convenience, for those who can't see it all pervading. So the absolute truth or the absolute reality is that just like sunlight is all pervading, the divine grace and divine presence is everywhere. It may seem more manifest in a man of realization, but it doesn't mean it doesn't exist in a sinner. The self is very much there in a sinner, but it is not seen or perceived because of the imperfections in a sinner, because of his own desires and ego and attachment. It may not be evident, it may not be seen. As the mantra says, the self is very much there in the most miserable situation, the most delusive person, the Atman is there.
Of course.
So I'm only saying from the absolute standpoint, a matter of fact, which the Shastras are saying. But still, I'll have to create a conducive environment for my own growth. So I've created pockets of experience which helps me grow. But a point comes. So in the initial spiritual sadhana, everybody seeks an environment for their growth. Mark my words very carefully. In the initial stages of spiritual journey, you seek a specific environment or a company or an individual or an environment for your growth, and that is called satsang. You go out into the world to seek satsang. But as you evolve, wherever you go, you create a satsang around you. So you don't have to seek a satsang. You become the center of satsang. So people who have no thoughts of satsang, you influence their thoughts and create a satsang for them. So this is various grades of evolution. You don't need to filter out anything negative. In your presence, there is no negative. So as you spiritually evolve, one may have to go to a particular temple, church, or a mosque to create that experience of divinity, to associate with the higher, to remind you of God. But as you evolve, you will invoke divinity in every walk of life. Everything you do becomes one long chant of the Lord. Whether you are singing or dancing or walking or dining, everything becomes a one long chant. You are reveling in that bliss of Atman. You don't have to do anything exclusive to say, this is spiritual, this is not spiritual. There is no separation. You become one with that self. As Ramatirtha, when he spoke, he said, I see Brahman in the brooks. I see Brahman in the flowing waters. He saw Brahman in the flowers. Saw Brahman in the birds chirping Vedanta. He said, the birds chirped Vedanta, he said. We are not able to see God in a temple. There he saw birds and flora and fauna resonating with the radiance of Brahman. So it is only different grades. So it doesn't mean it is not there. It is only we are trying to personify it. We are trying to magnify it. We are trying to create a place of worship because I'm not able to see. Start somewhere. All of us have to start somewhere. But that doesn't mean that alone is. You got to move on. All right, sir.
So the the concept of pran pratishtha, is that just to make the devotee feel that there is the presence of God in a statue, or is that actually doing something to it?
It is to begin with somewhere. A devotee, a seeker, if he needs a form, it is facilitated, that's all. But one moves on from there. You don't confine God to a form. You don't confine God to the sanctum sanctorum. You don't confine God to the parameters of the temple or the place of worship. You try to see Brahman beyond the walls of the sanctum sanctorum. You see the same Lord, you see the same Krishna, you see the same Muhammad, you see the same Buddha, you see the same divinity in everything is his creation. Can I not see him in everywhere? Why should I only see in a particular form? It starts there. It permeates everywhere. So everyone needs a starting point. It's a starting point where even the lowest of seekers can get attracted. But as the seekers evolve, they see it permeating everywhere.
But then how do you justify the miracles that people experience with deities? Like when Sant Tukaram got slapped, the actual deity of Vittala in the temple had that mark of slap on his face, and then the Brahmin realized that what he did was wrong, and he went and apologized to Sant Tukaram.
These are stories, I can't comment on them. I don't go with personalities or stories or experiences. I'm talking the general truth. I've answered the question. Please, if you can verify it in your own reconciliation. I'm not negating anything, but there are various stories and parables which are said. I can't sit in judging them whether right or wrong, or verify whether correct or wrong. It's not my purpose in this classroom. So specifically, each one can take their own exercise of further study and clarification. But what I've said answers the point that you have asked. I leave it to you for further clarification. So you can come back always and clarify, please. All right.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Mantra 13, please.
एतत् श्रुत्वा सम्परिगृह्य मर्त्यः प्रवृह्य धर्ममणुमेतमाप्य समोदते मोदनीयं हि लब्ध्वा विवृतं सद्मनचिकेतसं मन्ये।
Etat Shrutva, having heard, Samparigrahya, having grasped well the virtuous mortal separates and attains this subtle. So having heard and grasped this, which is the self, the virtuous mortal separates and attains this subtle. The subtle refers to the subtle self. So you separate the gross from the subtle, you separate the lower to the higher, and the virtuous attains the subtle, attains the higher. Having obtained the joy, the source of joy, he rejoices indeed. I consider the abode of Brahman wide open to Nachiketa. Sadma, Sadma, the house, Vivritam, wide open. The abode of Brahman is wide open to you, O Nachiketa, because you are the wise, you deserved it. You, in every way, you deserve it. And all this is he saying even before he has given out the Atma Vidya. Okay. Now, the three words, Shrutva, Samparigrahya, and Pravrihya. These three words are implicating the sadhana that we as intellectuals are told to do. What are the three words? Shrutva means having heard, refers to Shravana. You have heard what the gurus have said. Having heard what was said by the gurus, what should you do? Samparigrahya. Having grasped well refers to manana. So you must start Shravana, back it up with manana, and then Prihya refers to the abstracting or discriminating, refers to Nididhyasana, which is meditation. So these three choice of words refers to the fundamental spiritual sadhana, which is Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. Knowledge, reflection on the knowledge to gain wisdom, and having gained substantial wisdom, you meditate. And who does this? The virtuous mortals, dharmasya. So the word dharmasya can be interpreted as someone who is doing virtuous deeds. But with reference to the Vedas, there is no question of doing a virtuous deed. When you say a virtuous deed necessitates a motive-driven action. When I say I am acting on virtue, it indicates or implies a motive or a desire in action. So when the Shastras use the word dharmasya in the context, it is keeping to the Vedic norm. What is the Vedic norm? The Vedic norm is to attain the ultimate dharma, which is to realize yourself. So when they say dharma, dharmyam, it doesn't mean good desire-ridden actions. It means trying to attain the state of Brahman or Atma Vidya. I hope you understand the difference between the two. Amitama, do you understand the difference between the two?
Sorry, sir. Okay, sorry about the noise in the background, sir. Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, we don't hear any noise.
Okay. So the difference between Brahman and Atma Vidya, right?
No. I can certainly ascertain the noise you are lost in. What did I say? No. What did I say?
I think the train of thought was the Vedic norm is to ultimately realize self.
Yes, but
And
what is the word dharmasya can also mean virtuous deeds, right?
okay, yeah.
When I said virtuous deeds, what does it mean?
Uh, virtuous deeds is everything that you do to achieve the state of the
No,
self-realization.
no.
Sorry, sir.
No issues, no issues. We'll get to that.
There is a grass cutter in the background. Sorry, sir.
Okay. Tell the grass cutter to wait.
Oh,
You say,
and
I'm embarked on Atma Vidya. You will say, did you not chant the word Shanti? Ah, then
the
say
first
Shanti.
Shanti, yeah.
Yeah. First Shanti is for cosmic disturbance. Second Shanti is earthly disturbance. The third
Yes.
Shanti is internal disturbance. So second Shanti, tell that fellow to shut up, keep quiet, switch off the meter. That's all. Don't disturb me. I am engaged in the Atma Vidya. Isn't it? No, I can understand. No problem. Now, what is the difference? What is the difference between a virtuous deed? A virtuous deed means a deed when it's performed with a motive in mind, which is categorized as unselfish deeds, vis-a-vis a dharmasya refers to the Vedic meaning is to only attain the Atman or Brahman. There's a difference in the two. So when he says the virtuous mortal attains this subtle, he refers to the one who not acting on good deeds. He talks of one who does the necessary to attain the Atma Vidya, to attain the Atman. What's the difference? Padmanima, good to see you after a long time. I know you have been there, but good to see you. Tell me the difference. We can't hear you, Ma. Can you please unmute?
When you say that you are performing a deed, though it is virtuous, there's an intention behind that. Some karma is being done with some motive. The other one is just like that, you forget everything and you get immersed in your goal to reach. But irrespective of the action that you perform.
No, still you need to perform action to get to the goal, isn't it?
Yeah.
Without action, how can you get to the goal? But what kind of action we are talking about? What kind of actions gets you to your goal?
Selfless.
Selfless, correct. So the difference between action with a motive, which is usually a virtuous deed, is interpreted as an action with an unselfish motive, vis-a-vis actions that take us to the goal are beyond vice and virtue. They are actions which are driven towards the attainment of the self, which are categorized as selfless actions, which are known as motiveless actions. So the first step of the initial stage of spiritual journey is you are told to perform unselfish actions. For what purpose are you told to perform unselfish actions? Now, having mentioned that, I'm just moving ahead. Okay, Padmanima. Now, when in the initial stages, we are told to perform unselfish actions. Be a giver. Don't confine yourself to your own I and mine. Give with this, with that
That doesn't
grace.
happen naturally.
It doesn't happen. It has to happen with a conscious effort. No.
Initially.
you may have a natural affinity to give, but it must be even a person who has an affinity to give, even a giver must consciously give. Otherwise, you may be unmindful of giving. But to a person who is not a giver, also the Shastras advise, be a giver. Adopt that path of yajna. Take on to the life of a sacrificer. Be an unselfish person. So why are we told to be a giver or perform unselfish actions?
That alone may help you to reach your goal,
What goal?
to attain moksha.
Then you're contradicting what we said earlier. If I
No,
perform
moksha
virtuous
is
deeds,
no.
huh? Confused, huh?
I'm lost for words.
I know. No problem. No problem. Now, what I'm saying here is no problem. Think along now. I'm sure you'll get it. It's very simple. See, when a seeker is told to live a life of sacrifice, unselfish actions are being advised only to shed your selfishness. The only purpose you embark on a journey of unselfishness is to get out from the selfish comfort zone you have been. You're very comfortable thinking only of yourself and your I and my. Get out of that comfort zone. You will not grow there. Think of a higher cause. Think of a larger cause. Identify with the purpose and sacrifice yourself to that. There is growth for you. All right. Now, for a person who's already embarked on an unselfish journey, for him, he's told, drop that unselfish motive, get on to selfless actions. So for a person who's selfish, unselfish is prescribed. For a person who's unselfish, selflessness is prescribed. So different practices for sadhaks at different levels. You can't say what I'm doing is the highest, is the only thing. You are like a frog in the well. You don't say anything beyond that. Come out of that, you know how broad the world is. What is the real sadhana you will see? You see the reality, what you are caught up in. So when the Shastras say virtuous, the Shastras only mean selfless actions. And selfless actions are beyond punya and apunya, beyond vice and virtue. So you must get on to that highway to get that will get you to the self is the performance of motiveless or selfless actions. Not just mere good desire-ridden actions. You've got to understand it, theoretically understand, then at least you will be able to switch, make that switch from unselfish to selfless. Though there will be a percentage of unselfish actions, there will be a percentage of unselfish or selfish actions, but predominantly you must get on to performing selfless actions. Selfless actions is where you have no desire to do it, you have no motive to do it, yet you do it. Why do you do it? Because it has to be done. That's all. There is no interest attached to it, nor is there a fruit attached to it. You just do it because it has to be done. Vis-a-vis, you do an action to seek a fruit, whether it's unselfish or it is selfish. So it's rather difficult to get into that phase of selfless actions. An action done with no desire to do it, an action done without seeking any fruit in it, but yet you do it. Why? Because it has to be done. Why it has to be done? Because there is a certain obligation. You're obliged to do it, you do it. It's impossible or a person who's predominantly selfish should do selfless actions. Only a person who's unselfish, very highly unselfish, can switch to selfless. Do you know why is it? Harish, can you answer that question? I hope you got the question. The question you have to repeat first.
For a selfish person, it's very hard to be unselfish, but for an unselfish person, it's easier to go to selflessness.
No, that's not the question. The question is, it is difficult for a selfish man to be selfless, but rather easier for an unselfish man to be selfless. Why is it? Means you can't, from selfishness, you can't directly reach selfless state. Unselfishness is the means to get to selflessness. So it's only unselfish man can be selfless. A selfish man cannot be selfless. The question is why?
An unselfish man has already got the characteristic of giving, if not taking. I think he's the unselfish man is, I mean, from what I would understand, he's halfway there. So the pathway is open for him to take another step up towards the selflessness, because he's already got that characteristic formed in
Characteristic of what? Sorry?
of giving, or at least not being a taker, but he's already
What has giving or taking got to do with being selfless?
No, I'm talking about unselfish. I'm talking about unselfish.
Yeah. Now, unselfish, you're a giver, but how does that help me to get to selflessness?
Because an unselfish man would not have too many desires.
Nah. How can you say that? He also has desires, motives. I'm only making it difficult for you, Harish, by saying no, no, no.
I'm not sure, Guruji.
No problem. Sitaji, no problem. Think along, Harish, please.
Yes, Guruji.
This unselfish man becomes less egoless, ego as well as he will become more and more sattvic. Selfish to unselfish and unselfish to selfless, egoless as well as sattvic.
Okay. You're not wrong. So the point, see, if you so we're talking of from selfish unselfish to selfless. Now, what happens when you are selfish? You're entertaining gross motives, which are impure in nature. But when you become unselfish, your motives are subtler. So the motives are purer. When you reach selfless state, there are no motives. If you were to relate it to a stain, imagine a fabric has got a patch of stain. It's so dark and intense. What you have done, you've put it through a couple of washes, you've scrubbed it, you've put through a stain remover and removed the stain. Having removed, there is little stain residue left. Selfless is no stain at all. So why is it easier for an unselfish man to perform selfless action? Is because the motives are much purer. So it's easier to get rid of a purer motive than a grosser motive. A selfish motive, very difficult to get rid of. Because we are approaching selfless actions as motiveless actions, you're able to see the point, Harish, here? The unselfishness makes the motive more purer. So it's easier to get rid of a purer motive than an impure motive. So ego also is less, or the impurities are less. Yes, Amitama.
So, sir, can I say that the actions between an unselfish person and a selfless person may be the same? The only difference is the motive, the intention, right? So in an unselfish person, although it is purer than selfish, I still am doing a good deed with the motive to maybe look good or whatever it is. But my actions are unselfish. But selfless, the action is exactly the same, can be exactly the same, but the motive itself is completely I mean, there's no expectation.
Absolutely. How can the action change?
The action can look exactly pure.
Exactly. Right? No, action may look exactly the same. You may be doing the same field of activity.
Right.
I may be teaching this knowledge. I may be in the spiritual field, doing the same thing for X number of years. But what has kept changing is the characteristics of my motive.
So until
it becomes 100% selfless, there is a residue of unselfish and selfish. Every action, until they are 100% selfless, till then there will be other two motives. So the whole spiritual change is not switching the field of activity, is to switch the modus operandi. How are you operating in that field? So what changes is the intention, is the motive. That changes, not the activity. The activity will remain the same. I can't do what you're doing, neither can you do what I'm doing. How can that change? It can't. That's my swadharma. My swadharma is this philosophy or in this field. So I will remain in this field. But the spiritual transformation is at the level of the motive. Which is a very subtle, at a subtle level, the change is happening. Is your kind of thoughts or feelings or the motives that you entertain. You'll not have a motive at all. It will be difficult for you to say, what am I doing it for? That's the best action where there's no motive at all. Then why are you doing it? It has to be done.
Yeah. Wow.
So therefore, every time we are told is to keep questioning, for what are you doing? Whatever you're doing, for what am I doing it? For what am I doing it? You know, other day, Gayatrima, she was asking me, so, Guruji, why are you going to the US? I said, my only purpose is to spread the wisdom, something which has made so much impact in my life. And you have been associated, are associated, and you are benefited by this wisdom. X number of people are benefited. The only thing is that this knowledge should uplift as many people. And there's no desire in it. It has to be done. It becomes my dharma. It becomes my duty bound that this knowledge must spread to uplift others. So either it can be done with a selfish purpose, or it can be done with an unselfish purpose, or it can be done with a selfless purpose. And why am I doing it? Because it is sadhana for me. It will help me to get to my goal, which is whatever the goal is. And if it's the highest goal, then it is self-realization. So when it is directed to the goal, an action has to be done. That's all, because it takes me to the goal. There's nothing else other than that. So keep questioning every action that you're doing. For what am I doing? That's when you get to know what is the nature of the motive. If you don't do that, you get carried away by the action. You don't know the characteristics of the motive. Yes, ma. You wanted to say something? Is it still?
Yeah, I was just wanting to check whether I'm right in thinking this. So unselfish, you can rationalize that the motive is pure. But selfless, there is no rationalizing. It is the right thing to do. So somebody from the outside observing you cannot judge and say he is selfless. That's a very personal thing, because even you yourself, since it's not driven by any intention or motive, you are doing it because it is the right thing to do. It's just it's something personal. No one outside can say it is selfless. But unselfish, yes, you can rationalize.
See, it's impossible for me to see what is your motive behind what you're doing.
Yeah.
Nor can you gauge what is my motive behind it.
Yeah.
It's not. It's very difficult to gauge the motive. And far more difficult to understand a selfless motive. Now, I'll give you a context in the Mahabharata. You know, there were two personalities who are highly misunderstood. The two personalities were Dronacharya and Bhishma. Bhishma, he gave away the kingdom. He did not want to be the ruler, to which the two, the Kauravas and the Pandavas, they were fighting. Because he did not want. He is a grandsire, and he gave up that kingdom. If he took up, his lineage would have been, but he didn't want it. So Bhishma gave up the throne, and Dronacharya is the guru who taught archery to all these people, all these fellows. Now, when there was a war which was being waged, they both supported Duryodhana, which was adharma, knowing well the inevitable end, because they were against the Lord Krishna, who is epitome of dharma, of righteousness. And they knew the inevitable end, that they will have to sacrifice themselves, because no way they could win against the aggressive good, which is Lord Krishna, which is the righteousness. So everybody says, how can Bhishma and Drona, knowing their stature, they support adharma? They did not support adharma. Their actions are the most selfless actions. The highest selfless action is Bhishma and Drona. Highly misunderstood. What they did, Bhishma and
That's
Drona
what I
were
think.
ordinary people, ordinary soldiers. They were ordinary men in the kingdom. And when the king decided we will fight, they supported whatever the king decided. They were mere soldiers under the instructions of Duryodhana. They tried to put logic and sense to him, but the king decided, no, we will wage this war. So they said, okay, they just supported that cause. So they had nothing to do with the cause, they had nothing to do with their action. They just did their dharma as a soldier. And what is the slogan of a soldier? A slogan of a soldier, mine is to do or die, not to question why. They did not question the integrity of the decision to fight the war against the Pandavas. They just did their duty as a soldier. So their actions, a soldier does not carry motive to a battlefield. He does his dharma. Fight, fight, retrieve, retrieve. He doesn't get involved in the decision making. So he doesn't incur any sin from that action. So that is selfless action. But yet, their actions are highly misinterpreted, misunderstood, and they question the integrity and attitude on the motive of Drona and Bhishma. So they were completely selfless. So they were mere soldiers. They had no say in the decision. So no, such are motiveless actions. Very difficult to understand. In fact, often misunderstood. Very often selfless actions are misunderstood. So be very, very mindful when you start judging others, especially people who are of a higher caliber. Don't make the mistake of judging them by what you see them act. Their actions are very highly misunderstood. In fact, great men are never understood. They only misunderstood, because a small mind is trying to gauge a giant intellect. How can you understand them? And they are not bothered to go and justify their actions. They just carry on. Whom all will they go and justify? They just carry on doing what needs to be done. Whatever has to be done. You may be portrayed in a particular way, but if you have a clear picture, you carry on doing. Doesn't matter what the world thinks. All right.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Yes, Panigraji.
Guruji, actually, I was thinking of a very fundamental question. Can there be a situation of absolute right or absolute wrong? Or absolute white and absolute black? Or absolute truth or absolute untruth? Because
in which context are you asking, sir?
Interpretation is concerned, it is all contextual. Like you gave the example of the role of Bhishma and this thing, Drona and things like that. They may be doing the right thing, but it's what is true to me may be untrue to you. What is black to me may be white to you. It's all contextual. It's all situational.
Yeah, indeed. There's nothing as absolutely right. Very true. But I took the example only to convey how difficult it is to understand a motive of a person. Even if there's a motive, it's difficult to judge. Like as Shakespeare says, I am cruel only to be kind. For example, a little earlier I said, if you people don't switch on your video, don't come for the classes. Oh, how can Guruji, how can you be so cruel? How can you say that? I said with an intention that I see you, I connect with you, I engage you. There is a greater possibility of communicating with you. You may not know my intention, but you may be offended by the action. So don't be offended by the action. Get to the intention behind the action. And just in the context, I am cruel only to be kind. Even when there's a kind motive, it can be not seen in the cruelty of an action. So in that context, I said it is rather difficult to visualize or conceive what is the selfless nature of a man. It's difficult because they're operating on a different plane of consciousness, like literally different degree, a different caliber. So it's difficult to understand them because I am still trying to gauge them from a point of motive. So how can a person with motive assess a person who's motiveless? Rather difficult. So I wouldn't try and gauge. So in that context, I was saying, but you're right. There's nothing as absolute right. It's only from their perspective how you must see it, rather than trying to interpret from our standpoint. All right, sir. Thank you, Setuji. One person supported. I know I'll always have your support, sir. So the word dharmasya in the context, as I've said, is not to mean a virtuous action, but here dharmasya is to uphold dharma. The absolute dharma is to realize the self, and only selfless actions leads you to the self. So these words, though familiar, they have a different meaning, and we need to justify in context like this what that means. I'm glad we did justice to every word, every mantra. That's the objective, is to ensure there's no question of doing injustice, but rather do justice to what the Shastras are roaring the truth, but we have to uphold it. All right? We will come back and continue. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.